Good evening, folks, and thank you for joining us once again here on Liberation Lighthouse, where we try to create a safe space to talk about the things that are uncomfortable to talk about, honestly. Uh, Mainly anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and of course, PTSD. On tonight's episode, we will be talking about San Pedro, another medicine that is out there and available that is used for the treatment of some of these ailments. I did the research. Again, I don't have any firsthand experience with it, but my good friend Chris here has tried it in his personal life. And hopefully, we can add a little anecdotal information on top of what is out there in order to gain a better understanding of what this medicine does. Ready, Chris?
Let's do it.
Let's do this. San Pedro. So, for those of you that don't know, San Pedro is actually a cactus in its indigenous and South American Spanish speaking areas. It's called Huachuma. It is one of several cacti produce that can help produce an alkali that we know as mescaline. Now, this psychoactive compound did inspire the term psychedelic to begin with. San Pedro grows prolifically throughout the Andes and all the countries that border them, and it's prized as an ornamental and landscape plant worldwide. You may have some San Pedro if you live in the Southwest, as part of your xeriscape out there. The cactus flowers only open at night and just for a few days, sometimes unfurling for only a single night before beginning to decay. So I hear it's a beautiful thing to see if you get the chance to see it. Now, the reason we're here, we want to know if it's going to work for what we needed, and mainly PTSD. So, like other classical psychedelics, mescaline containing cacti have the ability to induce mystical experiences capable of catalyzing profound and lasting personality changes. Common mental health ailments like depression, PTSD, addictive behaviors, and anxiety disorders are all potentially treatable with these psychedelics. Cultural beliefs and group setting may also play a role in the healing with San Pedro. Psychedelics taken in traditional settings and in nature have demonstrated that enhanced therapeutic potential, especially with long term integration. With this in mind, it is possible that aspects of the traditional San Pedro ceremony held in a naturalistic setting can uniquely complement psychotherapy by maximizing the psychological benefits of nature relatedness. But until thorough research is concluded or conducted, these claims have not been verified. So, again, this is all anecdotal. I was unable to locate any major study out there. My understanding is that there are some in the way, but we're still trying to, the jury's still out. Nobody has gone out and done it. So, the name San Pedro, what does it mean? Who named it this? Well, the scientific name Echinopsis paracanoi has a long history of being used by the Andean traditional medicine indigenous people. Archaeologist studies have found evidence of use going back 2,000 years to the Moche and Chavin culture, although Roman Catholic Church authorities after the Spanish conquest attempted to suppress its use. This failed, as shown by the Christian element in the common name San Pedro cactus, meaning the St. Peter's cactus. The name is attributed to the belief that just as St. Peter holds the keys to heaven, the effects of the cactus allows users to reach heaven while still on earth. So it must be quite the experience there. Did you find any spiritual notes to this when you were using it, Chris?
Yeah, it number one, the first time I experienced it was in a more traditional shaman guided setting, and it's got some of the benefits that heart opener like MDMA or Kana or other things will have.
Mhm.
It. I believe I could be wrong on this, but I had heard once before that the structure within mescaline was actually part of what later became derived for MDMA. That
Hmm.
But again, don't take my word for it. Not a scientist. It's just
Yeah.
something I've heard. So I know that there's at least a correlation and overlap between the two. And it is also highly psychedelic.
Mhm.
So, much in the same way that psilocybin, LSD, mushrooms, etc., could be a psychedelic. It's got that. So it's got an overlap of those two things. In addition, it's called great grandfather in the same way, or grandfather in the same way that ayahuasca is often called grandmother. So that it feels like it's got a bit of a masculine energy to it. What I mean by that is it's a good medicine to use when you're also going to be active. Often it will be taken along with hikes or physical exertion or some even dancing ceremonies because it tends to bring up a lot of energy and emotional energy, and being able to move through that, the somatic movement of that energy through, I think, is one of the more healing aspects of it. And in addition, on medium to high doses, it can be profoundly psychedelic. Again, kind of getting to that point the same way ayahuasca does, where it'll dance you rather than you're dancing it. Um,
Mhm.
and in those spaces, uh, tremendous visions, as well as very challenging visions, can happen.
So are these, if I may, are these visions that are superimposed to your actual reality? Is it a hallucination of sorts, or do they actually take you out of your body type of experience, like psilocybin might, where you might enter, another realm, or does it keep you kind of grounded yet let you see beyond what's there?
Yeah, it really depends on dosage, right?
Okay.
And also how your body reacts. So, as an example, um, most of the people who were there in that ceremonial setting that I was in were pretty much like, back, if you will, within like the 8 hour mark, and probably feeling an afterglow a little later than that, and probably done. My guess is about 10 hours or so later, right?
Wow.
Able to sleep. My experience was I I didn't really fully come back until probably I don't know, 13, 15, 17 hours. It was a pretty long time.
That's just one dosage, or is it like ayahuasca where you keep taking it throughout the night?
Single dosage.
Single dosage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And but it just goes to show, like we've said many times, right? Everybody and every body are different. And so while I haven't found myself particularly sensitive to other medicines,
Mhm.
one that I found myself physiologically very sensitive to. And so, like the dosages that I've used since in other ceremonies have been significantly less than that first ceremony. So it's something to, again, always know going in, understand how each of these medicines affects you, take full responsibility for your experience in your body, and um, I would, with all of them, recommend uh, stepping your way in instead of just jumping fully off the cliff, if you will.
Any side effects like ayahuasca with the purging with San Pedro?
Not that I was aware of, although again, it can be ingested in multiple ways. So you've got San Pedro, you've got peyote, you've got refined mescaline. Like there's different ways to take it. If you're taking the traditional San Pedro, which is a ground up cactus, you have to have a lot of it. So the biggest challenge in the beginning is your stomach gets like kind of like because you've had a significant amount of it, and you really, it's like your belly is like full. That's how I felt, like just overly full, and that experience, which can be uncomfortable. I have known people to purge on it, but not in the same way of ayahuasca, more as like um the incidental type purging that can happen on any type of psychedelic.
Okay. Okay. Well, good to know. Alrighty. Properties. Huachuma contains mescaline again, which is the phenethylamine and it's chemically related to MDMA. On the other side of that spectrum, we got LSD and DMT, which are the main compounds in ayahuasca, and of course psilocybin, the main compound in mushrooms that are in the tryptamine family. Because it is a bit gentler than many other plant teachers, Huachuma has earned the nickname the grandfather around the medicine community. Mescaline itself is non toxic. And while there are a few studies on Huachuma itself, there is a Harvard Medical School study that investigated the long term effects of just regular peyote among members of Native American church and found no evidence of psychological or cognitive deficits at all. Again, but they were studying peyote and those attributes just because they're in that similar psychedelic realm. There were no actual studies done on San Pedro or Huachuma. Dosage, and I think Chris spoke a little bit about this. Now he spoke about having the cactus mashed up into a gourd or something, and liquid poured into it and drinking that end, and that required a lot more of the cactus to be ingested. What I found is that if you ingest it as the dried powder or the tea made from the cacti, again, it's a little bit easier to get that potency up. However, dosing is imprecise if using a live cactus, as the distribution of mescaline is not consistent throughout all parts of the cactus. My understanding is just below the skin of the cactus is what you want to actually dry, make into a tea. That's got the most medicine in it. And again, if you take the tea version with the dried powder, the effects are more potent, and you don't need to drink as much of it. Okay. So an average dose of pure mescaline is anywhere between 20 and 500 milligrams. The onset will begin within 1 to 3 hours, depending on the metabolization rate, and may last up to 10 or 12 hours, which is what Chris experienced. Typically, an active dose of mescaline will last under 24 hours, with visual effects averaging around 10 to 12 hours. People experience distortions in sensory stimuli like sounds and colors, and even experience synesthesia. While intoxication can occur, it is reportedly unlikely for fatality. So nobody has died on this yet, right? I'm sorry, for fatality to result. There are mescaline deaths reported in animal studies, but these occur at a level of mescaline toxicity, which is unlikely to happen in a San Pedro ceremony. Again, it's just massive amounts of it being ingested, probably more than are humanly possible, but that doesn't mean go out there and try it.
I think there's also a difference, just to be careful. You have, like, you mentioned up above here on this that there's pure mescaline, i.e., it's been derived and refined, and that's different than the powdered up cactus, right? So that when you get to the powdered up cactus and everything else, like, the amount you have to consume there is substantial. Your belly's probably going to give out before you get to anything that is like truly dangerous. However, when you start to get into the stuff that's purely refined, I don't know if it's possible to have, beyond intoxication, so like morbid dosage rates. So I would just be really careful, especially with the refined stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. Don't go out there and try to figure out if you're that one guy. Risks. Any psychedelic is potentially risky with people with pre-existing conditions, especially those dealing with hypertension or heart disease. Mental health risks are more significant for those with a history of psychosis, but in general, mescaline is a low-risk drug with some very rare and potentially fatal exceptions. Mescaline is considered the least potent classical psychedelic. San Pedro is thought by some to be among the safest psychoactive plants, but traditional ceremonies might involve adding other plants with toxicity potential, such as datura. mescaline-based synthetics can be harmful. Again, this is what Chris was talking about, the pure mescaline. It doesn't occur in nature, and it's probably not a good idea to just take some purified, refined version of this. Mescaline is rapidly metabolized in the liver, and for this reason, there could be a potential for complications for those with liver conditions. Early studies involving mescaline and ethanol withdrawal did not demonstrate complications or life threatening symptoms, but the real risks are unknown without clinical trials. People who seek mescaline from illicit sources may inadvertently encounter a potentially toxic synthetic instead. Any person or provider working with mescaline should make sure to test the substance and confirm it is not dangerous, laced, stepped on, whatever you want to call it. I don't know your sources where you might be finding this. I would just go to your local, Lowe's or Home Depot, see if they have it in the cactus aisle, right? While testing kits are usually legal, mescaline is not. People who microdose isolated mescaline should be cautious of contaminants. Again, we don't know what else has been added to it. Legality. Now, here's the tricky part. San Pedro cactus could be considered semi-legal in the US. The cactus itself is legal. Again, if you live in the Southwest, you might have some of it just growing in your backyard and never knew you had it. However, isolating the psychoactive compound of mescaline within is not legal. So having it, buying it, selling it, as long as it's in a plant, you're fine. Trying to isolate the psychoactive compound in mescaline, you're not fine. However, is that legal or illegal? I'm guessing as long as you're not trying to sell the powder or the tea as an illicit drug, you should be okay. It's just a guess.
In truth, in terms of laws go, if you are, and you've got this down below as well, right? So
Yeah.
if you prepare it for consumption for yourself or for others, there might be some jurisdictions where that is legal, but unless you're part of like the Native American church or on those lands, it's illegal to consume.
So, as with all naturally occurring psychedelics, mescaline is biosynthesized and naturally produced by living organisms. Commercial nurseries and hobbyist gardeners sell San Pedro every day. In fact, many people buy San Pedro for landscaping. This is, again, very popular in the Southwest, or as an ornamental plant in a pot without knowing that it is a visionary plant, but it is illegal to prepare it for consumption. So, I'm reminded of the little pots that people gift for the holidays or Christmas or whatever. Maybe it's a Southwestern thing. They're usually cacti, just different kinds of cacti. And now I'm wondering how many times have I actually seen San Pedro and just didn't realize what I was looking at. But those tiny plants are so tiny, I don't think they could possibly have enough of the psychedelic compounds in them to be worth grinding up, putting in a blender, and making it into a smoothie. Yeah,
it takes quite a bit of it. So you're definitely looking at bigger plants, for sure.
Definitely. So that was it for my research. Again, I apologize. I really did look. I had multiple sources with the same stuff. There's not a lot of data for San Pedro on its own. There's data out there for all the other stuff that we've covered, but I found that interesting. I don't know if it's just not popular enough, or if people just don't regard it as a potent psychedelic.
Well, I mean, I think that's something that's interesting, right? It has an incredibly long history, especially in some of the Native American and Central American, South American cultures. And so it's got this long history of being used in ceremony, but be isolated in terms of research, like way less so. I think one of the reasons to just put it on people's radar is when you get into these medicines, like part of understanding like you and what your toolkit's going to include is that your biology is going to behave differently, or you might have a different trust or experience in different ceremonies, right? Um, Seeing MDMA, for example, used in a more therapeutic session, i.e., therapist office, one way of utilizing medicine, and then having San Pedro utilized in a indigenous ritual, along with other people, and often movement, sometimes dancing, like all of the things that can go on there. Those are two very different experiences. And they can be very deeply healing depending on what you're going through, what your biology is like, what your challenges are in this moment. So it's worth knowing and having on your radar. However, if you're looking specifically for PTSD, I still don't have a better recommendation than MDMA therapy. So MDMA along with a therapist, along with integration, done multiple times over the span of months. That seems to be, from all the research that's provided, from everything that we know so far, the most effective treatment down that route as we're talking about medicines.
Right.
However, as you get into further things like releasing emotional energy, getting a little bit more into the somatic nature of trauma being stored, in the body, and sometimes movement or body work or other things being helpful for that. That's where understanding these other medicines, finding very trustworthy and experienced practitioners, and then using the medicines alongside that type of guidance can be incredibly powerful.
Definitely. Um, I find it is interesting because I come from that Hispanic native culture.
Mm,
I remember my grandmother, especially. She had the cannabis plants that she would ferment in alcohol and use for rheumatism, for arthritis, and she would put them in her temples and her wrists and whatnot. And being a cynical teenager, I remember telling her, "Oh, you're doing it wrong," that kind of thing. But it's odd that she actually now she would actually make something called mezcal, which is an alcohol
mhm,
out of a different cactus. It's a maguey, and I remember these jugs. It's basically moonshine
mhm.
that she would ferment uh, forever and a day. And I remember one of these jugs making it to my father's house, and I asked him what it was, and he's like, "Oh, it's mezcal." And I'm like, "Are you gonna drink it?" He's like, "Oh, I'm saving it for a special occasion." I'm
Mhm.
like, "Okay." And he's like, "Well, guess what? Today's a special occasion. Break it open."
Mm.
And so I crack open this jug, and I swear the smell of it just like permeated the house almost instantly. And it's
Yeah.
kind of like you're like, "Whoa, I'm not sure I want to drink this now." It's one of those. But again, different cactus for a different reason, and that was basically moonshine. But again, it's interesting that mescaline, mezcal, all these chemicals that come from the cactus have very similar names, and I often wonder if my grandmother did it for her own um, medicine practice. She was very much into the yerbera and curandera side of the house, where she knew what each plant did and what we used for what and how to do it. Unfortunately, a lot of her knowledge was lost with her. I'm not aware of any of the kids or grandkids kind of taking her up on kind of following that tradition. So
Yeah, it's a
our
challenge.
loss.
These long held traditions and this incredible long knowledge, right? So you talked about your grandmother using the cannabis plant. You've talked about her using whatever cactus mezcal is made out of. I've had
Yeah,
mezcal too. Like I actually
yeah.
like it,
I believe
right?
it's agave, maybe
Yeah,
maguey, one of
yeah.
those.
I think it might be agave. So I've had that, right? Similar name, but again, very different medicine and experience.
Yeah,
And so I don't have a strong recommendation, honestly, when it comes to should somebody not use San Pedro.
right.
I have found it very beneficial in accessing and moving through stuck emotional energy. That's where I found it useful. And it's a medicine that encourages you to get up and move rather than lay back and have the experience. Again, that's been my experience with it. Everybody uses these things slightly differently. And so, if you're at a point in life where you're challenged emotionally and finding that maybe you're spending a lot of time on the couch rather than getting up and being with nature or moving or whatever else, the potential that it could be a medicine that's helpful for you in whatever way you find a practitioner to guide you through. Maybe it's microdosing, maybe it's minor dosing in hikes, maybe it's the full-on indigenous experience. So have it there, but it's more of an awareness than it is, like this is the medicine for you. However, callings happen. It's like when we talked about in the ayahuasca episode, the last episode, where I'd known about ayahuasca and been on my radar for probably 5 years, maybe even longer than that, 5, 6, no, even longer, like 7. It's been on my radar for a long time. And it wasn't until a year ago that I felt called to. I went to South America in order to experience it because I felt truly pulled to the medicine. And that's where you start to get into like your internal knowing, your internal intuition, or, if you choose to go down that route, like the spiritual nature of these medicines as well. And so, if you truly feel pulled and called to something, then I'd be really curious about that. And I would follow that up. You don't have to do it, but I'd follow up the curiosity and understand why and learn more about it. And maybe there's some lesson there for you. But if you don't feel called to it, and you are having very, acute symptoms, again, PTSD, then MDMA therapy and others still believe can be the more effective route to be able to help through that. And then once you're out of the challenge of the triggers of PTSD, then you can choose where you want to go from there. You might just want to never take another medicine again and just live a normal life, which is incredible, beautiful, and awesome. You may choose to, understand yourself, the world, your consciousness, spirituality. You may decide to go deeper into some of those areas. And if so, then these are incredible tools.
Definitely. And if we have no questions, I'd like to end the show with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration information. To find a facility near you, please go to https findtreatment.gov. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-TALK. Once again, 1-800-273-8255. Behavioral Health Treatment Locator, https findtreatment.samhsa.gov. And the SAMHSA National Helpline is 1-800-662-4357. Please, if you or somebody you know is struggling, don't hesitate to call out for help. You're worth it. You are definitely worth it. And all you got to do is stretch that hand out, and there'll be somebody there willing to help you out of that hole. I promise. And with that, I'd like to bid you all good night and a good weekend.
All right. Be well.
Be well.